Hey everyone, and welcome back. This story is a testament to why you should never mix friendship and multi-million-dollar business ideas. Today, we're talking about betrayal on a scale that few people ever experience, the kind that doesn't just break your heart but absolutely gets your future. Imagine pouring your blood, sweat, and creative soul into an idea with your absolute best friend, only for him to literally steal it all, leaving you with nothing but debt and a front row seat to his $50 million success party. Sounds brutal, right? But the world has a funny way of spinning around, and years later, the thief came crawling back, desperate, with his own empire crumbling. Get ready, because the way our narrator, Mark, handled this is pure, cold-blooded revenge gold. Let's dive into the story of the Nexus betrayal. My best friend stole my company idea and made $50 million, leaving me broke. Years later, he came begging for a loan to save his dying business. I simply replied. Ethan and I met during freshman orientation. We were both computer science nerds with equally terrible fashion sense, but we shared one thing: ambition. We weren't just going to graduate and work for someone else, we were going to build an empire. We were inseparable. We spent more time in my cramped dorm room, fueled by energy drinks and stale pizza, than we did in class. He was the charismatic face, the one who could sell an idea to anyone. I was the technical architect, the one who could actually make the idea work. We were the perfect team. The idea that would define our lives and ultimately destroy our friendship came to us during our senior year. It was a simple, elegant solution to a massive industry problem, a platform we called Nexus. We didn't just talk about it, we built the MVP in my room. We skipped parties, worked through holidays, and poured every dime we had into the early prototypes. We signed a basic partnership agreement on a napkin at a diner, swearing loyalty and promising each other 50-50 down the line. We were best friends, nothing could ever change that. After graduation, we moved to Silicon Valley on a prayer. For 2 years, we struggled. We lived in a tiny, overpriced apartment with mold in the bathroom and slept on air mattresses. We ate ramen and survived on sheer adrenaline. But Nexus was gaining traction. We polished the pitch, refined the product, and finally, we landed the meeting. Not just any meeting, a meeting with the venture capital firm everyone dreamed of. They loved us. They loved the idea. They offered us an initial investment that valued the company at $5 million, contingent on a few minor legal formalities before the final signing date. We were ecstatic. We hugged, we cried, we called our parents. We were finally going to make it. The betrayal happened 3 days before the signing. Ethan told me we needed to meet our new legal contact, Sarah, at the VC firm to go over the final incorporation documents. I remember rushing there, barely reading the fine print, just excited to put my signature down. I signed a huge stack of papers, most of which were boring boilerplates. Ethan signed everything too. Everything seemed fine. The next morning, Ethan didn't answer my calls. He didn't answer texts. I drove to the office, frantic, only to find the locks changed. I called the VC firm, and they told me the deal had closed yesterday. And that Ethan was now the sole owner and CEO of Nexus. I was told, very politely, that I had been terminated as a contractor and had no claim to the company. I felt like I'd been hit by a bus. I called Ethan 50 times. Finally, he answered, his voice cold and devoid of any emotion I'd ever associated with him. Look, Mark, he said, cutting straight to the chase. I'm sorry it came to this, but business is business. You signed the papers. What papers, Ethan? We were 50-50. I yelled into the phone, standing outside the locked office door that held years of my life. The papers you signed yesterday, he stated calmly. You signed a waiver transferring all your intellectual property rights and partnership equity to me for a symbolic dollar amount. You were a contractor, Mark. Not a partner. The law is very clear. I was speechless. I thought back to the stack of papers. One of them, I recalled, had been labeled IP rights transfer. I hadn't read it thoroughly. Why would I? I trusted him completely. You tricked me, I whispered, the realization hitting me like a physical blow. I didn't trick you, he scoffed. You failed to read the contract. That's on you. And frankly, Mark, the VCs didn't want the liability of two founders. They preferred a singular vision. This was the only way to get the deal done. It was a lie, obviously, a pathetic justification for pure, unadulterated greed. I hung up the phone and walked away, feeling physically sick. I had lost everything, my life savings, my work, and my best friend. I hired a lawyer, a cheap one, who quickly confirmed the horrific truth. While the original diner napkin agreement was technically a partnership agreement, the documents I signed before the VC deal superseded it. Ethan had cleverly hidden the IP transfer within a mountain of standard legal forms, and my signature was there. The lawyer said it would cost a fortune to fight it, and the chances of success were slim, given my signature. Ethan moved out of the moldy apartment and into a luxury penthouse overlooking the bay the very next week. Nexus launched 6 months later, and it was an immediate, overwhelming success. Within 2 years, the valuation was $50 million. Ethan became Silicon Valley's golden boy, plastered on magazine covers, giving TED Talks about disruptive innovation and following your vision. Every time I saw his smug face, promoting my idea, talking about our dreams as his own, I felt this cold knot of rage tighten in my chest. I, meanwhile, moved back to my hometown, took a low-paying tech support job, and moved into a basement apartment. I was depressed, broke, and broken. For a while, I couldn't even look at a computer screen without feeling physically ill. The betrayal was so deep it had poisoned my ability to trust anyone. But I'm stubborn. Slowly, painfully, I started picking up the pieces. I didn't try to compete with Nexus, that ship had sailed. Instead, I focused on a completely new field, working on advanced security protocols and blockchain development. I took classes, got certifications, and worked my butt off. I didn't get rich overnight, but I built a small, successful consulting firm. I made good money, enough to live comfortably, and I maintained a quiet, strictly private life. I learned the hard way: never talk about your success, never trust blindly. 5 years passed. Nexus was still a giant, but the articles had started changing tone. Ethan, it seemed, was a terrible manager. He spent more time buying exotic cars and attending exclusive parties than running the company. They missed critical updates. Their user experience became clumsy. Ethan had spent millions acquiring vanity projects that went nowhere. The valuation started dropping. I watched it all happen from the comfortable distance of my private life. I had removed Ethan from all my social media years ago, but the tech news sites still provided plenty of updates. Nexus was hemorrhaging money. The last article I read estimated their valuation had dropped from $50 million to perhaps $5 million, and they were in serious debt. Then, 3 days ago, my phone rang. Unknown number. I usually let those go to voicemail, but something made me answer. Hello? Mark? Is that really you? The voice was hesitant, reedy. It took me a second to place it. Ethan. My blood ran cold, but I kept my voice flat. What do you want, Ethan? He launched into a rambling, desperate speech. Mark, look, I know things ended badly. Horribly, actually. But I'm in trouble. Nexus is in trouble. We need a bailout, and the banks won't touch us. I remembered how smart you are. How brilliant your mind is. I actually had to lean against the wall, fighting the urge to laugh hysterically. He remembered how smart I was? 5 years too late. Go on, I prompted, my voice still devoid of emotion. I need a loan, he finally admitted, the word catching in his throat. A significant one. $2 million, to cover payroll and a critical server migration. If I can just get this over the hump, we can turn it around. I closed my eyes. This was the moment. The universe had delivered him right back to me, broken and begging. And why, after everything, would I even consider giving you $2 million, Ethan? He went back to the old charm, except now it sounded pathetic. Because we were friends, Mark. Best friends. Look, I made a mistake. A huge mistake. I was young, I was greedy. But you're successful now. You can afford it. Think of it as a second chance for us. We could even partner up again, 50-50, really this time. The sheer audacity was breathtaking. He still hadn't learned anything. Where is the dignity, Ethan? I asked. You threw me out 5 years ago without a thought, leaving me sleeping on the floor of a relative's house while you were buying Porsches. You stole my creation, my future. Ethan started to whine. I know. And I regret it. Every day. But if Nexus goes under, I lose everything. My house, my cars, everything. You don't want to see your old friend ruined, do you? Actually, I said, pausing just long enough for the silence to stretch tight, that's exactly what I want to see. He stopped begging and started pleading. Mark, please. Just think about it. You could save the company that you built. I did build it, I agreed. And that's why this conversation is actually very useful. You said I signed away my IP rights, remember? For a symbolic $1? Yes. And you signed it. It was legal, he insisted, clinging to that old lie. That's what your cheap lawyer convinced you of, I said, a slow, predatory smile spreading across my face. But there's one tiny detail you overlooked, Ethan. A detail only the architect of Nexus would know. I lowered my voice, speaking clearly and deliberately. The IP transfer agreement you presented was for the first version of the platform, the MVP. The one we coded in the dorm room. What you failed to realize, Ethan, is that Nexus 2.0, the version that actually went public and made you $45 million, relied entirely on the proprietary core security protocol I developed in the month after you cut me out, before the official launch. I uploaded it remotely to the development branch because I wanted the product to succeed, even without me. Ethan was silent. I could hear his panicked breathing on the line. That protocol, I continued, was never covered by the original IP waiver, because it didn't exist when I signed. It remained entirely my intellectual property. When Nexus 2.0 was built on it, the company automatically created a liability, a vulnerability I knew you were too arrogant to ever audit. I let him stew in that information for a solid minute. 3 months ago, I said, when I read about your imminent bankruptcy, I quietly contacted the original VC firm. Not the people who backed you, but the legal team. I presented them with the original source code, the timestamps, and the documented lack of transfer. They realized that if Nexus went bankrupt, and the assets were sold, that proprietary code, the very thing keeping Nexus running, would be mine, making the entire platform worthless to any buyer. No, you can't. Ethan stammered. Oh, I can. The VCs were thrilled to cut a deal. They need the company to survive, or they lose their remaining investment. And I hold the patent for the core protocol. So, I didn't get a $2 million loan, Ethan. I got something much better. I waited for the full weight of the truth to hit him before delivering the final blow. I now own 51% of Nexus, I stated flatly. The VCs transferred their voting rights and majority share to me in exchange for nullifying my IP claim, making me the chairman of the board. Effective immediately, you are being removed as CEO. Your golden parachute is revoked. You get to keep your penthouse for now, but your equity is worthless, and you are officially done with the company you stole. Ethan started screaming, not with anger, but with genuine, raw terror. He swore, he sobbed, he demanded to speak to the lawyers. I just held the phone away from my ear, listening to the destruction I had meticulously planned. This wasn't just revenge, it was reclaiming what was mine through cold, hard business law. When the screaming subsided into choked sobs, I brought the phone closer. Ethan, I said softly, the silence in my voice far more chilling than his hysteria. What? He whispered, completely broken. I paused, thinking back to that dark, moldy apartment, to the humiliation, to the sleepless nights watching his success. I asked him one final, brutal question. The question that summarized the entire, miserable 5 years. How's the view from the bottom, Ethan? I hung up before he could answer. This morning, my phone blew up with 13 missed calls, not just from Ethan, but from his family, his panicked PR team, and the lawyer he tried to hire, who was quickly informed of my new position. The company I co-created is finally mine. And the best part? Ethan has absolutely nothing left to steal. That is an absolutely incredible level of long-game revenge. Mark didn't just walk away, he waited, he learned, and he used his own brilliance to dismantle the entire empire his former friend stole. It wasn't about the money for Mark, it was about justice, control, and reclaiming his intellectual property. What do you think of Mark's move? Was taking 51% and removing Ethan the perfect revenge, or do you think Mark should have let the company crash completely? Let me know your thoughts on this complex situation down in the comments below. If you enjoyed this wild tale of betrayal and ultimate vindication, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and ring the notification bell so you never miss another video. See you in the next one.